There is a house at 10 Downing Street in London that has been the official residence of the British Prime Minister for nearly 3 centuries. Walpole insisted that it become the residence of the First Lord of the Treasury, rather than being given to him personally, a characteristic piece of political theater, because Walpole was, in practice, the Prime Minister in everything but name. He moved into Downing Street in 1735 and refused the title while exercising the power. That combination, the substance of authority without its formal declaration, defines everything about the man who invented modern British government. Robert Walpole, 1st Earl of Orford, was born on August 26, 1676, at Houghton Hall, Norfolk. He came from a family that was politically active but not grand. County gentry, Whig in sympathy, connected to Parliament but not to the innermost circles of power. He was educated at Great Dunham, Norfolk, and afterward became a scholar of Eton and subsequently of King's College, Cambridge. The death of his elder surviving brother cut short his academic career, and, instead of entering the church, he returned to Norfolk to help administer his father's estates. It is a pattern that will seem familiar from other great figures of British history. The man originally destined for the religious affairs, recalled to the material world by family death, who discovers in practical politics a vocation more suited to his actual temperament. The event that transformed his prospects and, through him, transformed British government was the death of Queen and in 1714 and the arrival of the Hanoverian succession. Robert Walpole was a British Whig statesman who is generally regarded as the de facto first Prime Minister of Great Britain, serving from 1721 to 1742. He is the longest-serving Prime Minister in UK history, with a tenure of over 20 years. George I ascended the throne speaking no English, knowing almost no one in England, and regarding the Tories, who had been making peace overtures to the French, with deep suspicion. The Whigs, who had supported the Protestant succession and opposed the Tories' flirtation with Jacobitism, suddenly found themselves in an almost unassailable political position. And Walpole, rehabilitated and formidably capable, was the most skilled Whig operator in Parliament. What made Walpole's ascent to effective supreme power possible was a crisis that destroyed his rivals, the South Sea Bubble. In 1720, the South Sea Company, which had been granted a monopoly on trade with South America, and whose shares had been inflated by speculation, official endorsement, and general mania, collapsed catastrophically, wiping out thousands of investors across every class of British society. A corruption scandal in the King's cabinet led to several members being kicked out, leaving Walpole as the single most powerful person left in the King's government. He had not been closely associated with the scheme's worst abuses, and he had the financial competence, real competence, not merely reputation, to manage the aftermath. He was named First Lord of the Treasury, effectively giving him control of British administration, and was also made the leader of the House of Commons in Parliament. From 1721 until 1742, 21 years, Walpole governed Britain with a mastery of parliamentary management that had no precedent. The system he built was not described in any constitutional document. It was not the product of any formal reform. It was constructed piece by piece out of the materials that the particular political situation provided. A king who could not speak to his ministers in a shared language and who spent significant time in Hanover. A parliament that was the only legitimate source of authority, and Walpole's own extraordinary talent for knowing what every significant politician wanted and what it would cost to provide it. The lover of peace who carefully avoided sleeping dogs, the cynic who knew the price of men, the creator of parties, of cabinet government, and of the office of prime minister. These nursery and schoolroom myths vanished before the harsh reality. His long pursuit of power, the desperate calculated risks, his vast appetite for detail, all of which made him for 20 years the colossus of English political life. The cabinet system, his most enduring institutional achievement, was not, strictly speaking, invented by Walpole. cabinets of senior ministers had existed before him. But Walpole transformed the cabinet from an advisory body that served the king into a governing body that answered collectively to Parliament, unified by shared party membership and shared political responsibility. When the cabinet fell, they all fell together. When the prime minister lost the confidence of Parliament, the government changed. This principle, collective ministerial responsibility, parliamentary government rather than personal royal government, is the foundation of every Westminster model democracy in the world today. Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, and dozens of other countries operate on variations of the system Walpole built in the 1720s and 1730s. His governing philosophy was captured in the motto, quieta non movere, do not disturb what is at rest. As Prime Minister, Walpole gave his country the longest period of peace and political stability in the 18th century. He kept Britain out of the major European wars that consumed the continent's energies and resources. He played a crucial role in managing the national debt, lowering taxes for landowners, and promoting trade, notably with the American colonies. He governed, in other words, not as a visionary reformer or an ideological crusader, but as a practical manager of a complex system, someone whose job was to keep the machine running rather than to redesign it. This conservatism was not merely temperamental. It was principled in its way. Walpole understood that the constitutional settlement of 1688, the glorious revolution that had established parliamentary supremacy and the Protestant succession, was both new and fragile. The Jacobite threat was real. The Stuart claimants still existed. Their supporters were numerous in Scotland and in parts of England, and a single major military or political crisis could have unraveled what the glorious revolution had achieved. Walpole's stability was, in this sense, the defense of a genuine political achievement. He tried to keep taxes low for landowners and was skeptical about the benefits of an expansive foreign policy, knowing that he had to sell the policy to Parliament. This is the other key to understanding Walpole's system. He was the first British statesman who truly governed through Parliament rather than around it. Every decision, every policy, every appointment had to survive the test of parliamentary support. This made him, in a very real sense, the servant of a parliamentary majority, and it made the maintenance of that majority the central occupation of his political life. His methods were not always pretty. He was more ruthless in his use of patronage and more obvious than his predecessors, and brought to the question involve his infinite capacity for detail. Patronage, the distribution of offices, pensions, contracts, and honors to secure political loyalty, was the lubricant of the 18th century political system, and Walpole used it with a frankness that shocked people who prefer to pretend that political support was motivated by principle alone. His opponents called him the screen master general, the man who screened his allies from accountability and screened himself from criticism. He deliberately cultivated a frank, hearty manner, but his political subtlety has scarcely been equaled. Contemporary portraits show a short, stout man with a jovial face and very watchful eyes, a man who wanted to seem simple and was extraordinarily complicated. He was a Norfolk squire who read Horace and collected paintings. He was a bluff country politician who outmaneuvered every sophisticated courtier in Europe. The plainness was real and the sophistication was real, and neither contradicted the other. His fall, when it came in 1742, was the result of the very thing he had most carefully avoided: war. Walpole's failure to maintain a policy of avoiding military conflict eventually led to his fall from power. In 1739, he was forced into the War of Jenkins' Ear against Spain, a conflict whose name, derived from a British captain's ear allegedly cut off by Spanish Coast Guard officers, displayed in a jar before Parliament, captures both the theatrical absurdity of 18th century popular politics and the genuine force of commercial and national feeling that drove it. The war went badly. The parliamentary coalition that had sustained Walpole for 2 decades fractured. He resigned in February 1742. On resigning, he said, "My Lord Bath, you and I are now as insignificant men as any in England." It was the remark of a man who understood power precisely enough to know exactly what losing it meant, and who had no illusions about the world's memory of the powerful once they ceased to be powerful. He was given the earldom of Orford and retired to Houghton Hall, the magnificent Norfolk house he had rebuilt during his years in power, where he lived until his death in 1745. His son Horace Walpole, one of the great letter writers of the 18th century, preserved his memory with filial devotion. His political system survived without him, adapted by every subsequent prime minister, and governs Britain still. What is the verdict? He was certainly the first to hold the position of prime minister in anything like its modern sense. The leader of a parliamentary majority, governing through a cabinet of like-minded colleagues, accountable to Parliament, building and maintaining a party coalition as the central work of government. Every prime minister who followed him, from Pitt the Elder to Churchill to Blair to the present occupant of Downing Street, works within the constitutional framework he built. He was not a great visionary. He had no grand reform in mind, no imperial project, no philosophical program. His leadership style emphasized conciliation over confrontation, aiming to maintain peace during a tumultuous period marked by frequent wars. He was instead something rarer and in many ways more valuable, a man who understood the machinery of government with complete clarity, who kept it running when it might easily have broken down, and who in keeping it running established the habits and conventions that made it durable. He refused to be called prime minister. He insisted the title was offensive, a suggestion of inappropriate personal power. The irony is perfect. The man who created the office was the one who most strenuously denied its existence. In the history of British constitutional development, few things are more characteristic. Thanks for watching. See you next time with another human story